At 70, I concluded that life was shit. I worked until I was 67, and nearly nothing to show for it, and for my service to God and man and government, I had these seemingly endless days of eating low-fat yogurts and trying not to break a bone. Karen and I married just after college, when everything was still gold-tinged and our pockets were lined with money. It would be years before we became hateful little imps, closer to our mobile devices than to each other or our 2 children. Kyle was 4 years older than Jenna, and he was the all-American papa's boy. Football, ice hockey, varsity wrestling, student government, conservative by nature like his dad. I never let him know how much he impressed me. I was his father, and fatherhood is the task of grinding the edges off of your children, so they're ready for the world. Jenna was the peacenik, bratty and contrarian, but inarguably bright. It was easy to imagine her leading anything from a bread pantry to a country. She spent her time with artists and other peaceniks, disappointing little Bolshevik types in tight pants who smelled of clove cigarettes. I regularly let her know how much she disappointed me. She was soft like her mother. When Kyle enlisted in the Marine Corps, he might as well have set the house on fire. I'm not entirely sure how his decision ultimately became a fight between his sister and me, but it turned into one heck of a battle. Her hair in a wild tangle, doors slamming and opening again. She cited statistics and made moral appeals, and I talked about patriotism and service. Service is something you could stand to learn more about, young lady. Carl tried to intervene, but finally fell silent and watched the verbal devastation. Karen retreated to the bedroom. The last thing she said to me was, "If Carl dies, it's your fault." The last thing I said to her was, "You're a goddamn dumb kid." But she was already slamming the door. We never saw her again. Karen was worried immediately, but for the first few days I was sure she was staying at her boyfriend's house. Carl shipped off to basic 2 weeks later, and I began to search for her. I still wasn't worried. As soft as she was, I knew she could take care of herself. Jenna would come home because she had to. After 6 months, Karen and I began to fight. I wasn't looking hard enough, or I was neglecting our family. She was being unrealistic. She was drinking too much. I was drinking too much. We slept in separate rooms and watched television in silence, and she spent hours every night combing the internet for any trace of our daughter. Nearly a year to the day of Jenna's disappearance, Carl was killed by a roadside bomb in Afghanistan. I was never alone with Karen again after that. We were in the same room many times, with counsellors, lawyers, a judge for the restraining order and a judge for the divorce, but never alone. Looking back, it seems we were treated from each other's lives all at once, but I know it was over years of bad decisions. That was over 20 years ago, and I have been alone in the universe ever since, until the morning they arrived. Ships the size of cities, swarms of fast-moving cruisers that looked like fighter jets. They made contact with one of our own, the translator. She was on every television, her voice on every radio. When I saw her, I thought I'd had a stroke. I stared at her face, her lips, the tilt of her head. That's Jenna. That's my daughter. I didn't understand it, and told no one. She looked 20, maybe 25. I read and read about the arrival, and decided that she must have been abducted and travelling at the speed of light all this time. It came as no surprise to me that Jenna existed in time different from the rest of us. Different from me. After a few days, their intentions became clear. This was not a polite hello. They meant to make this planet a provincial world of their larger state. They made no explicit threat of violence, but it was clear what they intended. I could barely hear her, deafened by the sight of her face. Jenna is alive. It took some time for me to admit. Jenna is a conqueror. I thought of Kyle, and how I prepared him for war all those years without even knowing it. I wondered if I had done the same to Jenna. Our children make their own decisions. They gamble with their own fates, but aren't we the ones who teach them how to play the game? Don't we load the dice for them, give them the opening coins, point them to the best bet? Did I prepare Jenna for the subjugation of our world? No one was truly afraid, not yet. Governments were discussing the offer, and whether to negotiate better terms. They knew we were about to be conquered, and were looking for a way to spin it. Meanwhile, the streets are filling with protesters. Their signs said, Earth first, #resist, live free, die free. It took me a long time to make a sign and come down to the street. I'm 70 after all, but I made it there. So many young faces, so much of the earth to love and fear for. I held on my sign where the television cameras could see it. It read, Jenna, call home.